Warmest welcome to all our viewers and readers out there. I am so lucky to bring you today Martha Hall Kelly, here to talk about her new book, The Sunflower Sisters, coming out in March. And it's surely going to be a bestseller, just like the previous two with Lilac Girls and Lost Roses, which are actually experiencing a resurgence in popularity during the pandemic right now as well, leading to book reprints. So I'm really excited to talk about the new book. I actually got to hear Martha speak. For those of you who live in Indy, I got to hear Martha speak at the 2019 Indianapolis Author and Book Luncheon about Lost Roses. So it's truly wonderful to get to come full circle and now talk about this last book in the trilogy. So I'm so honored, Martha. Thank you for being with us here today.
It's so fun to be here. Thanks for having me. That event in Indianapolis was amazing.
Oh, and you and the panel of authors we had were amazing.
It was so fun, wasn't it? And a great crowd.
Gosh.
That was back before, we were social distancing. So
right. Yeah, I was looking forward to this year, but of course that didn't
happen. Yeah, maybe next year. I'm hoping.
Yeah. Well, could you give a little teaser, a sneak preview or kind of book trailer of the Sunflower Sisters for the people who might be watching who haven't read an advanced reader copy yet, or who have read the other two and are anxiously waiting for that third book
to come out? Should I show you the cover of it?
Yes.
Here it is.
Yes,
do you like it?
I love it.
This one has pictures in it. I don't think the hardcover is going to. It has all the family in the back, but Sunflower Sisters is the third book about Caroline's family, Caroline Ferriday. And if people have read Lilac Girls, Caroline Ferriday from Lilac Girls, of course, was one of the main characters in that book. And that focused on World War II and a group of concentration camp survivors, Polish Catholic women who had been experimented on. And it focused on their journey. And then Lost Roses that you just mentioned was, or it goes back in time. Oftentimes, sequels go forward in time, but I just felt like I had done so much research on Caroline's family, and I thought it was so interesting where her philanthropy came from. So I wanted to kind of go back and kind of delve into the other wars, basically, because each one is a war. So we went back to World War I with Lost Roses, and that is Caroline's mother, Eliza, and how she helped a group of Russian women that had lost everything in the Bolshevik Revolution. And now I've gone back even further to the Civil War with Sunflower Sisters, and that's Caroline's great grandmother, and her name was Jane Eliza, and just amazing. And she had 7 daughters, and they were all, one more interesting than the next, and very powerful women. Unfortunately, she lost her husband. It's a little bit of a spoiler in the book, but she lost her husband to a terrible accident, and she was pregnant with her 8th child, who was a boy. So she had 7 girls, 1 boy. Her husband never knew that they had a son. But it's their story. It's the story of one of her daughters, Georgianne. So that would be Caroline Faraday's great aunt. And she was so proud of her Wolseley ancestors. They were staunch abolitionists. The mom, Eliza Jane, had grown up on a slaveholding farm, and she always hated slavery. And she instilled that abolitionist streak in her children. And so her middle daughter, Georgianne, as middle children are wont to do oftentimes, really wanted to make her mark in some way. She really was very attached to her father before he died. And I think that's a big part of why she went into nursing, to kind of fill that void of missing him and trying to make other people better, even though, she couldn't help him. And it's just about her relationship with her sisters. I often say that it's a little bit like Little Women meets.
I was just thinking that.
Oh, really?
When you were talking about those brave Wolsey sisters, the pack of them, I was just thinking, not since Little Women have we had another book that had this dynamic sisterhood like this book has.
Yeah, and not to compare myself to Louisa May Alcott, God knows, but but I do, I love that book. Everyone loves that book, but this is more sisters, so it was a little bit more of a challenge in that way. but I think that it's the same kind of period of Civil War, which Civil War in New York. I know Little Women takes place in Concord, Massachusetts. And I'm from Massachusetts. I think I've been to about 10 field trips when I was in school to Concord. So that might be part of why I like the Little Women so much. This takes place mostly in New York City, and because that's where the Wolseley women grew up. And once Mr. Wolseley passed away, they were living in Boston at the time, and then they moved down to New York to be with their family, so that they wouldn't be alone. And they moved into a townhouse in what is now the East Village. So it was really fun to go back and dig into what was New York City like in the Civil War. And it was really interesting. I wish I could just time travel back there for, just like an hour, because it sounded really fascinating. And I think that it will be interesting for people because it hasn't changed that much. The Civil War supposedly was this big shift, but in some ways we're still, unfortunately, in some of those same patterns that were in the Civil War. So that was very interesting too, even though I wrote it almost 4 years ago now. I think that a lot of, like, I keep seeing things in the news going, oh my God, I had no idea when I was writing it that it would be relevant.
Right.
I feel like it is. And the other characters in this, how in Lilac Girls, I had 3 characters, and one was Herta Oberhauser, the doctor, and one was Kasia, the young Polish girl. I did the same thing with all 3 of the books about Caroline's family, just because, I don't know, it felt like the way to do it. And so in this book, the Kasia character, in a way, is this girl named Gemma, and she's an enslaved girl on a tobacco plantation in Maryland. And I chose that mostly because I met this woman at an author event, and I don't know who sent her to me, but somebody did. And she says the same thing. And we had this crazy meeting, and we just started talking. They have people come and little shops and set up little vendors at some of the events at the Bellamy Faraday House, where I talk and sign books, and people get to shop, which is really fun. And so I was shopping at the little vendors, and one of the girls sold these really cute clothes, and we were talking, and I told her about Sunflower Sisters, how I was starting to write that. And it was about slavery and the Civil War. And she said, oh, my great grandfather was enslaved on a plantation in Maryland. And I said, I still get chills when I think about it.
The serendipitous moment.
Yes. And her name's Kathy Kane. And she said, give me your email and I'll send you some information about them. The Sauterley plantation is where where they were all enslaved. And so I said, yeah, that would be great. And I knew right then that I was going to go, and that I would, if I thought it looked like a good place, even if I didn't, I thought, I'm going to set my story there. First of all, Maryland was a border state. So that's kind of interesting. They didn't give up slavery that quickly because Lincoln was afraid that if he pushed them too hard on ending slavery in Maryland, then they would secede and join everybody else, which would have really, been hard for him in winning the war. And so anyway, not to get too historical, but so she sent me the information, and I went down there, and it's so moving because all of her ancestors are, they've got it's now a museum, formerly a plantation, and they've really done a beautiful job at renovating, the slave cabin, and it's incredible, just to keep that alive, to make sure people remember. And they've got, kind of the original list of the enslaved people on the plantation, and it's half of them are named Kane. So, it's just, I don't know how I got so lucky for her to just like be there that day, but and she's come to a couple of talks, and she stands up and talks a little bit about that part of it, which is really, I think people are really interested in that. So anyway, not to get off on a tangent, that's how I put Solderly Plantation in there. I changed it. It's called Peeler Plantation in my book, but Gemma is a girl that grows up there, and she's really lucky, she thinks, to have her mom and dad still. And her sister has been, there's a whole backstory, but her sister's close by. And, in those days, it was pretty rare to have your family still intact. And so that's kind of the whole story. Without giving away too much, she gets separated from them, and it's really, really hard for her. And she tries to get back and help them, but it's a hard road. And I think, I hope people can see how, from her point of view, how hard that was. And then there's a third point of view of Anne May, Wilson Watson Peeler, who is the mistress of the plantation. She owns the plantation and everyone in it. So she, as you can imagine, is, a complicated human. Yeah. The bad guy, I guess, basically, just like Herta, the Nazi doctor in Lilac Girls. But yeah, I try to make all of them not either good or bad, or, and I think maybe, that worked this time. I don't know. It's so funny with a novel. You do the best you can and what you think is good, and then you put it out there, and really it's the readers that tell you whether you succeeded or not. And so far, I mean, a lot of crying, which I think, it means I've done my job, because it's such an emotional
You've touched the heartstrings.
Yeah.
Well, and you've talked a lot about kind of these epic life-changing research trips you've gone on, like for Lost Roses, going to Russia and Paris and Southampton, and then for Lilac Girls, going to Germany and Poland. And so for this book, I was going to ask you if you had, it obviously takes place here on American soil under the shadows of Civil War. So I was going to ask you kind of what trips you had gone on. And you mentioned obviously that you had gone to this plantation, but did you go any other trips besides the plantation for research and things?
Yeah, Gettysburg. Well, first of all, I lived in Atlanta when I was writing Lilac Girls and for a lot of Lost Roses. So while I was down there, I knew that, because I signed the contract with Random House for Lost Roses and Sunflower Sisters a long time ago, like way back. I don't even know what year, but I've known I was going to write it for a while. So when I was down in Atlanta,
so you knew when you wrote the first one, it was going to be a trilogy from the start?
Not from the start, but as soon as it became successful, I went right back to Random House pretty quickly and said, I want to write these other two books that go back in time, and talked about, the gist of it. And they said, yeah, that would be great. So I knew I was going to do it. So while I was living in Atlanta, I was going around to as many museums as I could, former plantations. And there's the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta that I could walk to from my house in Atlanta. And they, oh my God, they help so much. It's just a treasure trove of wonderful artifacts and things down there. So I had started doing research down there and gone to, there aren't that many, actual former plantations still existing. They've either been torn down or burned down, or they haven't been, but there are a few around Charleston. So I went down there, and Magnolia Plantation, there's several. So I did that. And then when I moved up here, I went with my son to Gettysburg a couple of times, because one of the big scenes in the book takes place at Gettysburg. And I just wanted to get it right, because, it's one thing when you're writing about St. Petersburg and Russia, but when you're writing about your own country, first of all, it's way more, I don't know. I just was an emotional wreck the whole time I was writing it. So many times my husband would come into my office and I'd just be like sobbing.
He's like, what's going on?
What's wrong? But it's also, there's a lot of distance between that. I do get letters, Lost Roses and Lilac Girls were published in Russia and China. And oh wait, not Lost Roses, in China. Anyway, we'll talk. But They didn't like the whole revolution thing.
Of course.
Yeah, they said they would publish it if I took out the revolution. I was like, that's the whole
That's
story.
the book.
Cannot do it. I know. They were still willing to publish it, though. It's pretty funny. But
Like,
anyway,
publish it, make America not a democracy, and we'll talk.
right, exactly. But I get letters from people about Lilac Girls, never from China, naturally, but
Yeah.
from Russia. People, write me a lot about it. Because it features into Lilac Girls, because afterwards Poland is under Stalin, and so I portrayed it as not so great. But I've gotten a lot of letters from Russian people that are like, it was great. I was like, I don't know. Anyway, not to digress, but yeah, it's one thing when you're writing about St. Petersburg for an American audience. And,
Yeah.
I mean, Lilac Girls has been published in, I think, like 50 countries. But it's another thing when you're writing about, the heart of our democracy and in Gettysburg. So I had to really work with historians and, to make sure I had people read it several times to make sure that I wasn't, like doing something dumb. And they definitely told me I had. So, all sorts of little things.
Right.
But the devil's in the details. I got a letter once from somebody about Lilac Girls. I talked about a stink bug that, like, they got under something like a stink bug under a door or something. And an epidemiologist wrote to me and said, oh, the stink bug was not introduced into this country until, and this took place, the chapter was taking place in 1958. And they said the stink bug was not introduced to this country until 1959 or so. I was like a year off. I was like, really? Come on.
That
Maybe,
makes anyone scared to pen a novel, because they're like the smallest detail someone's gonna find. Like,
I know. And so now I'm a little, flinchy on that kind of stuff. But I think there was a wall at one point. There's a scene. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but anyway, there's a wall that I talked about, and I had said that they had built the wall like quickly or something, and the historian was like, oh no, that farmers built that wall, and people will get you on that. So I mean, I was glad that I had someone.
Yes. Because you don't want to distract from what you're trying to say, because people are lost in the minute details of the history, and even though it's historical fiction, so it gives you some leeway into the gaps. Like you said, the details can, but yeah.
Yeah, you have to really, with this stuff, I like to use a lot of details because I think that particularity really makes it resonate and ring true. But, they have to be real. I was reading something once where actually it was a book about Ravensburg, a book about the rabbits. It's a British book. And I just thought, this person did not do any
research.
Oh, it was like going to a shopping mall or something, and one time I read a book that had someone picked up, they were gardening and they picked up all of these long stem roses. There were a lot of them. And they said that they were really light. And if you've ever picked roses in bulk, they're really heavy. So it's just stuff like that, that once you're reading and you read something that is just not right, the whole book, for me anyway, gets a little bit kind of tainted. And I've had people talk to me, send me messages saying this is not true or whatever. And so, I'm to blame for that too. But I just try, the more I learn and keep writing, I really try and work on those details.
So is it something where, like, obviously it goes through editors and proofreaders and all of those things, but if it gets printed and then, like you said, later you find out some details that might be historically inaccurate, can you ever adjust them because like I said, lots of your books go into multiple reprints. So do they ever adjust some of those details? Do you ever call the editor and be like, hey, if before the next reprint, I found this out. So
Absolutely. Yeah. But the problem is, like right now, Sunflower Sisters is in the advanced reader copy. That means it's an uncorrected proof. And, there's lots of mistakes in it.
Right.
but the French proofreader for this, not the uncorrected proof, but the real manuscript, she has found like 10 things that we didn't find on this end.
Right.
And they, some of them are really small. And I think, well, I think we can get away with that. But other things, not so much. So that's when I make a list of them and call my editor, who talks to, if it's not too late, if the book hasn't been printed.
Right.
And then if the book has been printed, in the paperback go round, we can change things. But there was one thing that and it's funny things. My French proofreader is amazing. One of the characters in here, and one of the enslaved characters, sadly does not have her left hand. I can't tell you too much, right, but there's a reason why she doesn't have a left hand. And in one scene, I had her carrying something with both hands. And I mean, that sounds like, duh, how could you, miss that, right, Martha? But we all missed it. And so it's little things like that, I mean, I could not let that, readers would definitely pick up on that. But it's hard in a book. I'm sure even when the French proofreader is done, there's still going to be things that are, right, things that I didn't catch and she didn't either. But, it's hard. It's kind of a fluid thing.
Right.
It's
so
not
is it something, do you
math.
want people to like message you if they see something, or is it like if it's already been into paperback, there's no way to change it, so just it lies kind of thing?
Yeah, I think also I asked somebody to read an arc one time, and they gave it back to me. It looked like a porcupine. It had so many like little, sticky, right, post-its on it. And I just thought, okay, I get it, but right, this is not corrected yet.
Right.
We're working on that.
Yeah.
But I have to say, she did find some stuff that was really, really good. But so it's a group effort, I guess. But yeah, I had to at some point just kind of go, we all did the best we could.
Right.
Otherwise, you lose sleep.
Yeah. Well, and speaking kind of research and things, you have kind of a wealth of resources, talking about readers, you have a wealth of resources on your website for book clubs and readers to kind of enhance their experience when reading these novels. Some of the fun things you have in there that kind of give people kind of more insight into the novel, and the insights and the events are like food and drink recipes and menus that you've enclosed for Lilac Girls and Lost Roses. So I didn't know, have you thought of maybe some of the ones that you might come up with to pair with Sunflower Sisters? Or
well, it's always really fun. There's what they call themselves, Team Lilac, the Random House group. It's publicity and marketing and editing. And it was Team Roses for Lost Roses, and now it's Team Sunflower. They really contribute a lot to the book club pages. We haven't quite done it yet, but they always ask me, what do you, from the book, what food do you want to have? Yeah. And this time, there's some really good cookies in the book. Yeah. Also, I purposely put a lot of fun food in there because I knew that book clubs really like it makes it a fun book club. Right. And hopefully we'll be having in-person book clubs again at some point. And, they can make their butterscotch cookies or the butterscotch crisps. And my husband, what did he make? He made Caroline's apple crisp this year. Once in a while, he'll, make some recipes. And so, just to try them out. But right, yeah, that's really fun. I think we had a vodka drink for Lost Roses, and people really like them. Yeah. 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 And it just makes it really fun, I think.
So for the Sunflower Sisters, you're thinking primarily of the cookies and the butterscotch crisps and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to go back and look because they ask me that every time. And I'm like, okay, let me go read it and see. But I think that, yeah, it's mostly Georgie. She's Caroline's great aunt, and she's the one that wants to be a nurse in the book. It's mostly from her chapters. Um, but yeah, they had some really great recipes. And Caroline, weirdly, I found an old cookbook of hers, and it wasn't it was a you know how in communities like the Junior League or the Grange will
Right.
have a cookbook that they put together everybody's recipes,
Right.
and I collected those for a long time. And one of them was from Bethlehem,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's why I got it. But I didn't realize Caroline's recipe was in there, and it was
Wow.
an old
So
recipe from the Wolsleys. Yeah.
it's like if you ever doubt some of the things that you're writing, it's like you have these serendipitous moments all over the place. That like
Yes. I know. I don't know how serendipitous they are. I think that they feel serendipitous, but I think somebody's up there
yeah.
helping me, honestly. Yeah,
Well,
whether it's my mom or Caroline or somebody.
or maybe the whole gaggle.
I think there's a gaggle. Knowing this family, there
Yeah.
was definitely a gaggle.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and you talked a little bit before about how you like to use a lot of detail-oriented nature and particularity and details in your books. And so I know one writing process you've talked about in the past and that you've put on your website is these Pinterest photo boards that you've done for each book. So I didn't know, is that is there any other techniques that you use to kind of help you with the detail oriented nature that kind of help immerse the reader into the novel, besides the Pinterest photo boards, or kind of, can you talk more about those?
Yeah. Do you want to see one of the photo boards?
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
hold on a second.
Yeah.
It's kind of falling apart because I've had it for a long time, but it gives you kind of an idea. Like if anybody out there is, writing a book,
Oh, wow.
whatever. I don't know if you can see this actually,
I
but
can see. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so this is
Wow.
Jane Eliza up at the top, and she was, everything came from her. And this is her husband Charles that I told you about,
Yeah.
and these are all of their daughters. Abby, Jane, Mary, Eliza, Georgiana, Harriet, Carrie, and then finally the boy, Charlie. And since they had lost their dad, they said that his feet didn't touch the ground until he was 3 years old because they carried him around so much. But Mary was the great beauty. They all say, Mary was the beauty. Back in those days, they didn't have, um, like nowadays, we would never do that, I think, because we're more sensitive as
Right.
parents. You're not going to say this one's the beautiful one, but
Right.
that that's the way they felt in their family, and they were very kind of proud of Mary. And Mary wrote these incredible poems. But at the time, women were not, being an author as a woman was really not okay in society. So she let people believe that it was written by a man. People just assumed, and she didn't correct them. She was like, I don't want to say J.K. Rowling of her time, but that poem that she wrote, A Rainy Day at Camp, was in the pocket of every Civil War soldier, North and South. And she could never admit, the family could never
Wow.
divulge the fact that it was written by her. And then she went on to write more poems, and they were super successful. But there was always a mystery of who's writing these, what man is writing these incredible
Yeah.
poems. So that was Mary. She had 4 little girls. And then Jane was the clothes horse. She loved beautiful clothes, but she also was a Civil War nurse, as was Georgiana. And she's the main character in the book. And she wants to be a nurse so badly. But, she was very young, and you had to be 30 years old. She was not 30. This is her sister, Eliza. They wanted to be nurses together. Eliza married a very, very wealthy guy. Is he down here? Oh, yeah. Oh, no, this is Theodore. She married Joe Howland, and his family was right off the Mayflower, blah, blah, blah. Their family as well. But they lived in a wonderful house called Tiaranda that still exists in Beacon,
Wow.
New York. Yeah, I went there, and it's really
Yes.
quite an amazing, as you can imagine. And then Abby was the oldest, brilliant. And these two never married. I don't want to tell you too much because there's some parts of that in the book. This is Harriet, and Hattie, and she was kind of Mrs. Woolsey's best friend. They went everywhere together. And this is Carrie. She was the youngest. And if you remember in Lost Roses, Carrie is Caroline's grandmother. So Grandma Woolsey is Carrie, and here she is as a young girl. And she did a lot of work with orphanages, both what they called the colored orphanage in New York, which was um, horribly ransacked during the New York draft riots, and that there's a scene about that in the book. But Carrie was a force to be reckoned with, really, really smart. And she was the youngest and felt left behind, I think, because all these guys were off doing these incredible things, and she was at home, and they kept sending cannonballs and things. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy now. We think that's crazy, but they would send home things that they found, and they were like mementos from the war, but they were live cannonballs and things, and she hated it. And every time she got one in the mail, she was like, please stop. She was funny too. But anyway, yeah. So that's the family. And Charles, desperate, he would the whole war. He was so desperate to be in the war, and the mom was not. She didn't promote it because it's her only son, and but he really wanted to be in the war. And of course, they all were, supporting the Union Army. And he finally goes to war. And then I can't tell you what happens, but anyway, so that's a character board. And yeah, I do lots of other stuff in terms of, I have to show you my binoculars. I do a lot of research in terms of having the actual things that people used at that time, like these Civil War binoculars. And it really just helps me. It helps me be accurate, from what we were talking about before. But it also helps me. I mean, I actually spent a lot of time looking through these field glasses out my own window, so I know how far they can, how far away things can be that you see. So it's more accurate, and also just to describe what it felt like. They're French. A lot of the things with lenses, like spy glasses, and were French. And it's just really, I think it helps the reader really understand the story better when you have things like this. So I do a lot of that, kind of acquiring stuff. I have a Civil War Christmas tree. Do you want to see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Is that your office?
Yeah, this is my office.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you can see. That's where we came from. And this is the Civil War tree. Yeah. And I know you like Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
If I knew how to make the screen go in the opposite way, I would do it, but I don't. But this might work. What my daughter just did was, I don't know if you can see up close.
Oh, I see. So they put ornaments with each of their names on it?
Well, she did an ornament for each of the girls. And so it's just really sweet. Here's Mary's. Wow. Her name's Mary. So, she wanted to do Mary first. And in the book, I talk about each one. Gemma, the enslaved character, gets to know the Woolseys pretty well, and she kind of assigns each one of them a flower. And Mary in the book, Georgie's sister, loves morning glories. I don't know why, but that was her thing. So on each of the, this is Charlie's, the boy. On each of these, they get, here's Jane.
That's amazing.
And they each get a little, and Mother has a lilac because,
Yes, of course.
Because of course. But this doll is from, the period, which is nice. And interestingly, I think they didn't have a lot of blown glass ornaments at the time, but they would put things like patriotic. Mm-hmm. This was, I think it's general wear. I hope no one corrects me on that, but that was Charlie's, at one point, his officer above him But they put patriotic stuff on the tree, which is interesting, and gifts. That's why I put, some little gifts on here. But they didn't have blown glass ornaments. So I made it I tried to make it of the period. A lot of what they did was they made things to put on the tree, and also candles. I almost lit the whole thing on fire when I lit the candles, but I have a video of it at least. Oh, and here's my the new book that I'm writing. I can't show you too much of it because I haven't shown my publisher yet. I know. Here's the two main characters. I love it so much. But yeah. So I think mostly pictures in terms of writing and inspiration, but also I keep things on my desk. Like here's a little tin that has Lily of the Valley on it that's of the period. I just try and have stuff around that I can kind of channel, and it works.
It's like you're immersed in it, so it helps us be immersed in it, because
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I know you pour a lot over like letters and photos and correspondence and things like that to help you in your research. So I didn't know, because that's been such an integral part of your research and helping you write these books, has that changed your habit or actions at all in like what you do as far as letters and correspondence to your loved ones, friends and family, or how you archive correspondence or photos? Like has that changed kind of your habits of doing that? And then kind of a second tier would be like in these days where letters are now considered like snail mail and photos are all like, archived digitally and not printed, how do you think that's going to affect like future historical writers and generations of readers of their experience and research, because there's only so much that a computer can do. I mean, it can't fill that chasm or gap of like what this wealth of treasures, like you said, that you've used. So how do you think that's going to play out in the future with how we treat, in this world of communication and technology today?
Wow, that is a big question. And first of all, I read almost 100 letters between, obviously they didn't have email in those days, and that's how they communicated. They wrote a letter a day, especially during the war, because they were so starved for information because the newspapers were behind. And so it's fascinating to read their letters. And there's a really great book called My Heart Towards Home that I suggest as a companion book for Sunflower Sisters, but and it has a lot of the letters in it, but I read the letters at the source, at the Caroline Ferriday house. They have an archive that has all the letters in it, just because I felt like going to that primary source was really important, seeing the words on the page. And each of the girls wrote, and the mother wrote in a distinctive handwriting style. I get to the point where I knew who the letter was from just by looking at it.
Yeah.
It was really, really helpful, those letters. I reprinted a couple of the letters, like little pieces of them in the book, just, I don't know, for fun. But I got a lot of really good information on them and their personalities. It really showed through. But in terms of me and my own, I am a horrible letterer. I think I write good letters, but I don't know. I've always felt like, since I write so much, it's like the cobbler's children a little bit. I don't really
right outside of your
I don't know. When I have to write a letter, I just go, oh God. I don't know why. But part of it is anxiety over I want it to be really good. So I have to work on
expectation. Like I'm an author, so if somebody's gonna expect different of me.
Yeah, and I think I've always kind of when it comes to letters, like I do a draft and then I do another draft, and I write it so it's perfect. And so I wish I didn't have that. I would like to be more kind of like people when they dash off a note. I think I should do that more, because otherwise, you might never get a letter from me. But your question about the second half of that, which was what does that mean going forward? I
Yeah.
think it's a shame because I I had such a wonderful um, roadmap to write this book with, because I mean it was almost too much because I had so much information. Like with Lilac Rose and Lost Roses, I had pictures and some letters, but nothing like this. So this was just this monumental task um, of kind of distilling down what was important, because a lot of those letters were just what was going on in their lives, but it wasn't important to a novel where you have to have conflict and all.
Right.
So I think that, but that said, I think it would be a shame going forward to not have that, because it really was an incredible roadmap. And I think we are losing, we're losing a lot of that. My sister writes every night in her diary,
Oh,
in her
wow.
house, and she has since she was like 17. And so she keeps joking that, she's got a lot of journals. And, you know, I think that it's a roadmap for her kids and her family, which is really fun. And she goes back and digs into it, but people don't do that anymore. So I think that, yeah, it'll be interesting. Historians are going to have a hard time, I think, going forward with, a bunch of emails.
Right. It doesn't, like you said, it's not going to reflect like the character and personality, like what you got to see in the letters. It's going to be more black and white facts. It's not going to convey what you see when you see the photos and the letters. But you'll have to tell your sister to throw in some of your stuff in there too, so that you can live on. Since
Trust me, she tells me all the time. Did you know that you told me, so and so boyfriend
that way
of
you're off
yours?
the hook if you don't write anything down. Be like, just reference my sister's journals, and you'll have my history.
It really is true. She knows all.
Well, and I was gonna dive a little bit more deeper into Sunflower Sisters too. How hard was it to write the characters and actions of Anne Marie and LeBaron? Because obviously their acts were so horrible and heinous and vile to the slaves on the plantation. And I know that you've talked before in the past, like when you've had to write about the acts, the horrible acts the Nazis did, um, about having to, how horrible it was to write it, but having to bear witness to the fact and to continue to, make sure that history continues on and gets remembered, because things are getting forgotten and survivors are passing away. And so I know that you kind of have talked about that in relation to having to write, about the unspeakable acts the Nazis did. But I didn't know if you could talk a little bit more about how was it writing those two characters, because you knew you had to write those things that.
Anne May and LeBaron, yeah,
Yeah.
hard, I have to say. But when you're a novelist, I only write about things that I really feel strongly about and that I think um, would make an emotional story. And I think that I like doing that.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is it's not just the so-called good characters. And we
Right.
talked about before, even the good characters have things that I guess we would consider bad.
Yeah.
But people are complex. And I think when you have these complex characters, you can't think of them as this is the bad one and this is the
Right.
good one. You
The
just have to
villain
think
and
of
the.
them, right? Like with Herta Oberhauser, who, I mean, it's really hard to think of a redeeming quality, but I really tried to make her real. And I think it resonated with people because you're not born, even when you're born in
Right.
Nazi Germany, you're not born that way.
Right.
I mean, unless
Kind
you're
of understand why she took the path she did versus.
yeah, and I think it's important to understand how you kind of get that way.
Yeah.
And I think people are fascinated. I know I am, and I always want to write the book that I'm interested in reading. And
Right.
I think that it's really interesting to go into the shoes of that person. That what was it like to inherit a plantation and inherit human beings? What was that like? And so I really tried to research that character like crazy. When I was living in Atlanta, I did a lot of research on Anne May, and I think that helps because when you know what what they really, women like that were really thinking at the time, it's chilling. And just, I know things have changed in the world, but it's just chilling. It's same with Herda, or some of the other characters that I've written that were, just did terrible things. I think that's what's interesting about it, is why would someone operate on a 14-year-old girl, an
Right.
experimental operation in Lilac Girls, for example. And why would a plantation mistress do some of the horrible, or let LeBaron do some of the horrible things
Yeah.
that he did? And she did it knowingly. But what was that was fascinating to me in the research, because now I just think, I just don't, it's unfathomable in a way, how you could allow someone to be so horribly abused that way. But I hope I shed some light on that. I think
Yeah.
that, it's a terrible thing, and it's in our past, but I think it's really, really important to examine it and understand it. And I don't know. I guess we'll see what people think
Yeah.
about.
Well, and you kind of talked a little bit too about kind of the modern day parallels. Like, you didn't know when you wrote this book how much there would be some modern day parallels between that book and now. One of the modern day parallels I kind of felt was, I don't know if you got to see the scene when that first wave of our pandemic hit, where that U.S. hospital ship Comfort was like coming into like New York City's harbor. And it was like such a powerful, like, I had never seen that ship before, so it was such a powerful, chilling kind of seeing that ship pull in the harbor. And I didn't know if you saw that, if it made you think of like the hospital ships that like Georgianne worked on, or if anybody else had kind of brought up, like, once that had happened, the parallels between these hospital ships that you wrote in the book versus the ones that we were seeing here on our own soil during this pandemic,
Oh
or
my
any
God.
other modern day parallels.
It's so great that you brought that up, because yes, I totally did. And I thought, I am probably the only one that's
Oh.
thinking about that, but you were there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, those were the very first ones, the one in the book that Georgianne was on, and her sister Eliza, although that's a spoiler. But yeah, they were in a lot of danger too. I mean, nowadays, it's danger of a different kind. Those
Right.
frontline workers that are on there, are in danger of getting COVID, but they were in danger of getting smallpox
Yeah.
and typhus and typhoid, and also even German measles back then could kill you. So, so yeah, I did think, wow, we've come full circle.
Yeah, because I'd never seen, kind of like you said, the modern day version, and then it was like, oh, I just was reading about, it's like, like you said, some things have changed a lot, and some things you still see these parallels between the book and now. But another scene that really I thought was so poignant and heartfelt in the book, that I was one of my favorite scenes, was when Gemma was showing Celeste like the library and the books, when she was teaching Celeste how to like read and write. And she kind of was showing her, but making sure to give her like warnings with it, and kind of tell her kind of how dangerous that could be, because of course, when you read books, that can open up whole new worlds and whole new possibilities and whole new set of awareness and knowledge. And kind of like they say, quote, dangerous women read. So it's like, it's like reading, like you said, can be what some people consider to be dangerous. And so that's kind of one of the things I love about historical fiction, is the awareness and the education that it provides. But then there's some historical fiction novels that even take it one step further, where they inspire people to act, and they mobilize. And your books have done that. I didn't know if you could talk a little bit more about the project where the Florida Gulf Coast University partnered with the university in Sweden to do an exhibition on the white buses that helped rescue the prisoners at Ravensbrück. So it's like, yes, your books are going that extra step even further, helping with this mobilization. And so I thought that might be so interesting for the readers to hear about.
That was so rewarding. At the end of, I think it was in the middle of March, I was out on a book tour, and of course, COVID hit, and I had to come home halfway through. It was really sad. But one of the places I was supposed to go was to Florida State, and they had, as you put it so well, after they read Lilac Girls, they went on this. They were inspired to do this huge exhibit that was so beautiful about the white buses and how the Swedish white buses had come into Ravensbrück and other places, but mostly Ravensbrück, and rescued all these women at the very end of the war. Himmler said, uh, "Hey, I'm a good guy, right? You're gonna have, you're not gonna prosecute me because I did these good things, but please."
Yeah.
But that was his motivation. He allowed them to come into the camps and take all these women, and that's Lilac Girls. And that was taken from a real scene of, when they hand the baby up to the mom. That was a real mom, and the little boy in that infant is still alive. He was a teacher in Paris. I think he's retired now. But anyway,
Oh, and he probably couldn't even come see the exhibition because with COVID and everything, that would have been so powerful.
I know. And they had a survivor that was coming, and
Uh,
she, on her patch, she was an American at Ravensbrück, and on her patch, she wrote USA. You know how they each had a
right.
patch. So anyway, that was so inspiring that they wanted me to come and talk to them, and I that was one of my greatest regrets and sadnesses about not being able to finish the tour, because I was so looking forward to doing that. And they had all these artifacts that they had partnered with Sweden, I think it was Lund University, and had all these artifacts that you could actually see that were from Ravensbrück. They had to send them back, sadly.
Oh, I was going to ask that if they had gotten it back.
Yeah. But I don't know, maybe someday they can redo it. But it was so fun to talk to them, just Skyping with them. These are the people that were inspired to do that wonderful thing. And, it does go kind of full circle, because I was so inspired by Caroline. I mean, the minute I walked into the Bellamy Faraday house, I don't even know what you would call it. I just became so in love with her and her story. And I mean, I wasn't even going to write a book at first. I was just going to research her because I thought she was so interesting and inspiring. And so to be able to do that for a group of graduate students, it still gives me the chills. It's so wonderful.
And well, maybe they could have like a parallel exhibition in Sweden after this is all over, and then some of the people can come from the States, or I don't know. Like you said, it's a shame. It would be a shame not to get to.
I know. We have to continue that somehow.
Yeah.
And especially if it means that we can go to Sweden. I've always wanted
to Sweden. I fit well in a suitcase. No kidding.
Well, it was your idea.
Yeah, exactly. No, but we were also speaking of kind of the Ravensbrück projects. Besides that one too, you also had kind of a future upcoming project that you did with one of your friends when you had the trip back to Ravensbrück for the 70th anniversary of Liberation.
Oh,
you had
Stacey,
this documentary,
yes.
Save the Rabbits, where she interviewed 2 of the rabbits. And so I didn't know if you had any updates on that project.
Oh my God. It is amazing. She shows me every once in a while kind of a rough cut, and it's unbelievable. Well, it's grown. At first, it started, we used to go to lunch, Stacey and I, at this French restaurant in Atlanta called Anis, and we would just talk. I used to go to lunch with some women, like my son's friends' moms. You know how you do that, like
right.
And nobody wanted to go to lunch with me because I only talked about Ravensbrück and all of that.
Like,
and they were just like,
for me.
I thought we'd talk about something besides that, but Stacey wanted to talk about it. And so one day at lunch, she said, "What if I'm a documentary filmmaker. What if I do a documentary on Caroline Ferriday and how she helped these women?" And I just said, "That's such a great idea." And I was going to the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the camp anyway. And she said, "Why don't I get a film crew, and I was like, you're amazing. And so she
Right.
just got this film crew together, and we didn't even have appointments to interview the rabbits, but it all worked out. I really think there was some sort of divine providence happening, because someday when we have more time, I'll tell you
Yeah.
the whole story. But there really was divine providence. We both, Stacy and I, are sure of it. And so she got to interview. There were five rabbits that were still living at the time, and two had come to this 70th anniversary. And she interviewed both Wanda and Stasha. And oh my goodness, it's very, it's hard because it's so many years later, and it's hard to talk about it for them. But Stacy somehow got them talking about it, through an interpreter.
Right.
And some of the things that they talk about, I mean, I haven't seen all of it because she's done so much shooting.
Right.
She went back again without me,
Oh,
and continued, and she got all sorts of different people. I don't know if you remember Anise Poster-Venet from Lilac Girls, but she was one of Genevieve de Gaulle's friends who survived Ravensbrück, and was very good friends with Caroline, as was Genevieve de
right.
Gaulle. And she goes and talks to Genevieve de Gaulle.
Oh,
And she's one of the best people in the film, because she just, in that beautiful
right.
French, she just puts it out there about what happens at camp. And there's nothing like hearing it from the people. Now, sadly, Stasha passed away. Okay, Stacey and I were both really, really sad about that, because we had gotten to really love her. She
Yeah.
has a great sense of humor. Wanda is still with us. I think there are two rabbits still. I think they're both named Wanda, actually. But
Oh, wow.
anyway, I cannot wait. Every time I see um, just like a trailer or a rough cut,
Right.
it just opens the whole thing back up. And
Do
I
they
think
know
we're really
when?
lucky that she did this, because it's a lot. It's really expensive and a lot of work, and I can't wait.
Do they know? Is there kind of a date? Do they know when it might be done or released? Or
I think COVID unfortunately
oh, it's delayed everything.
has delayed everything, because a lot of this has to be done in person. But
Oh, yeah.
so a lot of it is, I guess we'll see what
Maybe
happens
next year.
next year. Yeah.
Well, and I think you had said too that you're doing another future project, just to, even though this is kind of the wrap up of the Caroline Ferriday family trilogy, because you did have so much research and so much with Ravensbrück, that you were going to be doing another historical fiction book that I think you said it centers around two women going to find one of the camp doctors during the Cold War. And you'd also kind of talked about researching like the women who gave birth while they were at Ravensbrück.
Mm.
So I didn't know if you were able to update us anything on that project, or is that still mom?
I haven't even given my editor.
Oh yeah, so mom.
They don't even know the title or any
Yeah,
of it. I mean, they know the premise, and
right.
I think they're really excited about it.
Oh, good.
But yeah, those were some of the characters that I showed you. It's two women who survived Ravensbrück, and yeah, that's a little different, because I usually have three characters. But this
Yeah,
is just the two of them, and they have this incredible. I mean, when you think about going, being arrested and going to a concentration camp together, I mean, it bonds you like nothing else. That's one of the things that I realized when I was writing Lilac Girls, that the women, even years later, they still talk about them like they really are their actual sisters. And so it's been fun writing that, because these two women, one's French, one's American, and they both end up, for reasons, at Ravensbrück. But a lot of the book takes place after they get out, and what happens, because they go after this very, very bad doctor. And the experiments that they did on the girls, the rabbits, that was just one slice of, oh, that's a terrible way to put it. That was just one part of the experiments. They had 100 doctors there. And so in this book, some of the characters from Lilac Girls Return, some of the people at the camp. But in terms of them, their journey going off and getting what they feel is justice that is due them. I was really inspired by um, Operation Paperclip. I don't know if you know about that, but
Yeah.
after the war, so many German scientists were brought to the United States. I think the United States wanted to get their kind of atomic knowledge, and these scientists.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that they brought over um, were criminals, and they had, murdered hundreds of people during the war, and they never really got that justice. And it's fascinating to read about Operation Paperclip, how in the U.S. they just kind of, turned a blind eye to the atrocities that they had committed, just because they thought maybe they could help them in the space program. So I really wanted to look at that, and from the point of view of two women, one American and one a French woman. I think I don't know. I love it. I think they're gonna really like it.
Is this for next year or is this for 2022, you think?
2022. Yeah, because 2021 is Sunflower Sisters, and then there's the paperback for Sunflower Sisters. I don't have any kind of control over when the books come out. I think a lot of it is just when Random House has a slot in their schedule when they can do it. But yeah, so that's a really exciting one. And then because it's more of a contemporary novel and more, I don't want to call it a thriller, but it is definitely, I think, more like a suspense novel of, yeah. Anyway, I love it. And then after that, it was two books that I am doing for Random House going forward. And the one after that is a contemporary novel. That's more like I guess a mystery / thriller.
Is that what you normally read out? Like, do you not normally read historical fiction? That's normally your genre that you read on your own, or is it just a?
If something makes me have all those emotions that I require in order to like drive through a book, I don't care what the genre is. But usually I really like women's fiction of, whether it's historical fiction or I love a good thriller. And since I'm writing one, I am reading a lot of those lately, scared to death, because I live in a very rural area. I'm always like, and I've already written a lot of the other book as well, the one after the Cold War book. And my husband keeps saying, we're gonna have to move because you're scaring yourself too much. Because the book takes place in my actual house that I'm living in now. It's changed, but it's, yeah. So anyway, I'm just so excited that I get to partner with a publisher that understands that what I want to write about, and they're excited about it as much as I am.
So it sounds like there might be future books that would be in other genres besides this. Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, I mean,
to write across genres like that.
I think a lot of it is. I think you have to. For me, I can only speak for myself. I just have to be excited about it if I'm going to write, because I think that really comes through. The reader. It's so funny. They know everything. It's uncanny. That was one of the biggest surprises about becoming a novelist, was that it's like this, it sounds so corny, but this window into you, and they just, they see everything. It's just amazing, and you really can't control it. And I think I'm at the point where I just want to, keep doing that, because I love that part of it in a way, that the emotion of it. And I think I read anything that I feel connected to the characters and the emotion of it. And that's a hard thing, because I'm a really picky reader. And those people that say, I don't not finish a book. And
Right.
I have so many on my Kindle that I try, and I'm just like, ugh. I'm
You're
not a
like, there's so
patient.
many good reads out there. If you've already this far in and it's not grabbed you, you're like, I've got to go to the next one because my to be read pile's towering.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of not fair because I think my book sometimes it takes a little while to set up. Um, so that's not fair of me to do it that way. But I don't know. I've just always been that way. I get antsy if it takes too long to be even mildly interested in the character. So yeah, I never write reviews about that though, because I figure I could definitely be tainting something someone else really likes,
Right.
because a do not finish to me is just kind of like it's not fair to the writer. If I read the whole thing, then I would review it. But
Right.
even then, I've gotten to the point where I just think that everyone has a different opinion. So
Yeah.
yes, I can give mine, but I guarantee you're going to read it and have a completely different idea of what I don't want to discourage someone else from reading it.
Right. Because that could be like their book. That could be like the book that they like cherish and their read of the year. But because we all bring such different things to the table, what you might not like, somebody else might like. And you hope everybody has a great read. It's just what your read might not be somebody else's read. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
And you look at Charlotte's Web online and it's got like 1-star reviews. It's like, come on. Really?
Yeah.
Some of my favorite books have bad reviews. So,
Right.
I just think um other other people love reviewing, and that's fine. And I like reading reviews. It's just for myself, I don't feel I don't feel like it's fair sometimes.
Kind of like if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yes. Although if I'm madly in love with the book, I
Oh,
do.
right.
Yeah.
So, shoot it from the roof, shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah, but I have weird tastes, so it's I don't know. I don't know if you learn that much about what
Right.
I like
Right.
because I'm not normal in my reading taste.
Right. Hold on, I'm gonna flip the light on real quick. I feel like I've gotten really dark. Hold on 1 second. We went from like me having total sun on my face to like being completely in the dark.
I know. I know. God.
Well, and I was going to say, besides upcoming projects with the ones we mentioned, you had also said that your brother had started writing a book before he passed, and so I didn't know. Have you ever thought about writing it to completion, or what was
Uh,
it about? Or
oh, it's just really, really sad. Um, I've never talked about that actually, but yeah, he was 2 years younger than me, and I was well into Lilac Girls. I hadn't gotten it published yet, but I think I was talking to agents and things at that point. So he came to me. He had written a novel, um, and I had done so much work on my own book. I realized that, this was his complete first draft. And I read it and I really liked it. But we were talking about, things. I had suggestions, and I don't know, he wasn't really, I think he thought, oh, you just write a book and you don't revise it. And so I think after I talked to him about maybe making some changes, he kind of lost, his
yeah.
excitement about it. Um, but but yeah, he took his own life
Oh,
shortly after that. Yeah, it was really, really, really sad. Um, our family is
sorry to
still
hear that.
kind of like so sad about it. And I think back to that, and I think maybe if I had been more encouraging, or when someone takes their own life, I think that it's hard not to go back and think, what if I had done this differently? He was just he was in a lot of pain. So yeah,
Ugh.
it feels good to talk about it though. Honestly, I think not talking about that, and I think he was very depressed. Maybe there's somebody out there that can benefit from hearing about that, and how, if there's someone that that you think might be depressed, just no matter what they say, make sure they get help, because it can be really, end in a bad way.
Well, especially in this time with the pandemic, all of our mental health are challenged with the pandemic right now. So especially in these times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes you don't even, people don't come out and say it. And he certainly never did. But I think you just have to sometimes, be get in there and, go with your instincts. Because I felt like at the time something was wrong, but I wasn't sure what. And, I'm not a psychiatrist, so it was
Right.
hard. But I think that, yeah, just go with your gut.
Your mom or dad must have really instilled a love of reading in you guys, because you writing, him writing, your sister writing in this journal every night. You guys are like these prolific writers.
Her cathedral was the bookstore.
Your mom.
Yeah, oh my God, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
She grew up really poor on Martha's Vineyard, and she wasn't a summer person. They lived there year round. And when the summer people left, her mother cleaned houses, and her father had passed away at that point. So they were really, really poor. And she they would leave behind books, like paperback books and things.
Yeah.
So she was just this crazy, voracious reader. And she would read the books that they left behind, but she never got to choose her own books. She always had to read whatever, the rich people on Martha's Vineyard were reading.
Right. I was going to say her taste might have been completely different than what these books were. But
definitely. And so when she married my dad, and she says she only married him to get off the island, which I think is really true, actually. She did not want to be on Martha's Vineyard anymore. But when she got married and, had some money that she could spend a little bit, all she spent it on was books. And I remember towards the end of her life, she died from emphysema, kind of on the younger side. But I'll never forget, she was really sick towards the end. And that last Christmas, my dad coming back, they ended up back on Martha's Vineyard, but because he wanted to move back there. But coming back through the snow from the little local bookstore there called Bunch of Grapes, and coming back with this huge stack of books. And I just thought, that's all she wanted for Christmas. And I thought, those will be read by in 2 weeks. She was just, it was crazy. And she would give them to her friends. And, that was her big thing was, who would want to read this after her. And then she made sure that they passed it on to somebody else. So she was pretty amazing. She read us E.B. White. She loved E.B. White. So we would sit, after dinner, and she would read us E.B. White. And I love that. I still love E.B. White.
Well, and her heart probably is so full to know that then she had children who went to write books and think, she was such a voracious reader, and for her to know that then her children wrote books would just.
Yeah, I wonder, because my dad was still alive when I got published, but he had had a stroke. And I used to tell him, Dad, I wrote a book and blah, blah, blah. And he'd be like, no kidding. And he would get really excited. And then since he had a stroke, he would forget every time. And so the next time I saw him, I'd say, I wrote a book, right? And he'd say, no kidding, tell me all about it. So it was this perpetual kind of, very sad, but also kind of wonderful too at the same time.
Getting to experience that, you published many books.
Right. Yeah. But I do wonder what my mother would have thought. And if I would have even written some of Lilac Girls, being worried that she might read it. Because or just, there are some things in Lilac Girls that are pretty, tough and racy. I don't know if I would have been
right. If you would have monitored yourself a little more or censored yourself a little bit more on it, and
maybe, I don't know. It's funny to think about, but I also wonder what she would have thought if she would have liked it, because she was such a, she did read so much. But I don't know. I think somewhere she is very, very happy.
I think so.
It's happening. Yeah.
Well, Well, and with the 3 books, they all have this flower in the title. And so I didn't know if that was like a conscious, like, okay, once you did the Lilac Girls and it was so successful, did you like think of like, okay, I'm gonna have a flower in each book, or was it just the nature of the books and the subject? It just would just present itself and fall into place.
That's a great question. I started out titling. I'm really bad with titles, but I started out with Lilac Girls being called The Rabbits of Ravensbrook. And then I said something to my editor about, I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I said, oh, it's tough because lilacs don't grow down there. They need a tough winter. And she said, Lilac Girls, why don't we call it Lilac Girls? And so at first I was just like, I had always thought of the book with my original title, but then I got used to it and I really liked it. And it was just a great motif because if there were, I did a huge book tour for the paperback, and people would put on these events and, have lilacs on the table. And, it was just such a lovely theme. And I thought, I want to know, and people would give me lilacs,
right?
Lilac candles. So I thought, okay, I mean, that's kind of a fun thing for the reader. Why don't we try it for Lost Roses? And again, it just makes it fun. And so that's why by the third book, I thought it has to be a flower, but
yes.
What for the Civil War? It was tough. But then I came across that, from reading
right.
it, I came across a piece of, I thought, really interesting information about the Underground Railroad and sunflowers. And so I thought, there you go.
And then it all fell into place.
But no more. No, that was it. So
you're like, I'm done with the flowers. You have one more hurrah with the sunflowers, and then
yes.
Well,
but
and then
it was fun.
Well, you talked before about how the next book is different because it's 2-person versus 3-person, but whether it's 3-person or 2-person, when you write from different points of view, do you write like one character all the way through and then kind of weave it all together, or do you like write like a chapter of this person and then a chapter of this person and then a chapter of it? Like, how do you, when you're dealing with, I know it's going to be 2 next time, but it was 3 the last couple of books. What's your process for doing it
Right.
with all the points of view?
Definitely not writing them separately and then write the other one separately. I don't know how, I guess I could do that, but so much of the story and telling it in a compelling way is who tells this chapter, who tells that chapter. And I think they can be talking about, when both of these characters are in a scene together, it advances the story. I'm not telling this very
No, I
succinctly,
get it. Yeah.
You have to know who is important to tell that story, that chapter, that scene, from what point of view. So it would be impossible for me to just write one person's story and then write another, because they really overlap so much. And at first with Lilac Girls, I didn't do an outline, but now I learned that it is very important. Even halfway through Lilac Girls, I realized it took me 10 years to write that book. And a big part of it was I kept writing stuff and going, oh, throw that out.
Right.
So now I realize, I wonder if I had an outline around here somewhere, but I think I cleaned up. Oh, here it is. I just started realizing you have to.
Oh, wow.
Can you see?
Yeah. Wow.
It's very big.
But that's amazing to see that.
Which one is this? Oh yeah, that was from Sunflower Sisters.
Wow.
They actually have one they have this cute little shrine at the Caroline Ferriday house, to me and my books and stuff. And they have my Lilac Girls outline there. But I realized pretty early on that you have to do that. And that way, if someone, a reader in a review one time said it's like a braid, and I think it really is. you really have to make those chapters, even though they're not talking about the same thing sometimes. Like in this one of the characters is running around Europe trying to gather information. The other one is somewhere like in a lot of danger, but she doesn't really know that she is. They're in two different places, but it has to be choreographed, like, because you go from one to the other. And I guess if I wrote them separately, some of those some of them might sync up okay, but maybe not. So
Yeah.
it's just the way that I've always done it.
And it kind of gives you it sounds like a framework too of like where you're going next, and like you said, to make you
Oh
more
yeah.
efficient. And
Oh yeah. I think that for me, they call them pantsers, people that don't outline, and then outliners, I guess. I think I don't know how people would write a book without knowing what the ending is. I know a lot of people do, and they love that, but it's kind of the danger of it.
you're
But
like, I don't know, you don't know, we don't know.
yeah, it's scary to me though, because with Lilac Girls, it's based on a true story, so I knew the ending, and
Yeah.
and um, so I got used to that, and um, I don't know how anyone writes without an ending. I mean, definitely with this Cold War book, I had my ending right away, and that way you can build towards it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you might get to the end and go, "Oh, this is there is no good ending.
Right.
So why did I spend all this time?"
Yeah.
So I'm definitely in that camp of know your ending to begin with, and then if other stuff changes along the way, at least you know what your what the trip is supposed to be like. You
Right.
know,
What
if you
what
don't,
journeys to the end.
right, if you
Yeah.
decide not to stop in Charleston, fine, but
Right.
at least you know you're going to Florida.
Right. Well, and I know that Sunflower Girls doesn't come out till the spring. So you'd kind of suggested in different talks about some different things people could kind of, like you said, companion books or different things people could kind of do, like to kind of lead up to like the Sunflower Sisters. Like Georgianne wrote a book, 3 weeks in Gettysburg. And um I think you did an interview with like the Bellamy Faraday house, and where you I think they said they have like a virtual webcam that you can like watch the gardens.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and then
that's
you also
right.
yeah, and then you also talked about like how Harvard has all the compiled Nazi doctor trials. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, so you kind of left these different things that people could do to kind of occupy until spring. So I didn't know if you had any other suggestions that might be good, like kind of lead ups or companions to Sunflower Sisters. Or I know you had kind of also talked about like updating and fixing up the cemetery at Bethlehem, Connecticut. So I didn't know if there was somewhere to kind of keep abreast of that progress or.
You know, there's a wonderful woman. So anyway, people don't realize that they haven't read Sunflower Sisters, that um, part of it takes place in this cemetery in Bethlehem, Connecticut, a real cemetery. And I can't go into too much about
Yeah.
why that is, but you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I just wanted to make sure, and I visited that cemetery, which is not on Caroline's property. She has 90 acres at the Bellamy Faraday house, but it's adjacent to it. And it's as many cemeteries of that age. Reverend Bellamy, who built the house, his gravestone is there. Um, and from like the early 1700s.
Wow.
So it's a really old cemetery, and it hasn't
Can you
really been
actually
cleaned
still
up
read the dates and the names?
on a
Wow.
lot of them. Yeah. And so I found this woman that would, and a lot of the gravestones are cracked, and the trees were the real problem, because what would happen is, in a bad storm that we have up here in Connecticut, they would fall on the stones, and that would, they're very expensive to fix. So I just thought, I talked to my husband about it and said, I'd really like to help get the old Bethlehem cemetery back to, be nicer. And he said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I found this woman that fixes broken headstones.
Wow.
I know, up in Massachusetts, and she comes down and she works on it. And oh my goodness, some of the pictures of what she has put back together, it's just incredible. It's very expensive and it takes a lot of work, but I figure, it's a passion project.
So
And
she uses like photos of like maybe from the past or what it looked like to help kind of preserve and restore the original.
she doesn't have photos of what it looked like before at that cemetery, but she knows from, I mean, she's just so good at what she does that when they're put back together, I mean, obviously they've been repaired, but
Right.
they're beautifully done. It's just so, I don't know. It
I
just
didn't even
makes
know
me
people
feel
like that
so good.
existed. That's amazing.
There's only like 4 or 5 people like her in the country, and I'm
Oh,
really,
wow.
really lucky, yeah, that she does it. And yeah, so I'm learning a lot about that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But that's one of the most rewarding things. And I think that somebody like Caroline, I don't know, I like to think that she would have been happy that because she was researching Reverend Bellamy her whole life up in, when after she got a little bit older, she moved up there when she was, a young teenager. But a lot of her archives are full of Reverend Bellamy and, because he built that house, the Hay.
Right.
And so I like to think that she would be happy to see that cemetery, kind of brought back to life.
Well, it's almost kind of like a little love letter from you to her for everything
Yeah.
that she's done, inspired you and done for you. And then that's kind of like your love letter back to her, kind of.
Absolutely. And it's going to take a while because, nothing ever happens overnight, but at least it's
Yeah.
going in the right direction, I hope.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I wanted to end on a toast because I know there's some people that maybe readers don't or viewers out there might not always know some of the unsung heroes of this whole trilogy, and I wanted to give a little toast to that docent tour guide who took you on that solo tour, and when you saw that picture of the rabbits, told you all about the rabbits and explained all about that to you, and then that Starbucks barista who accidentally gave you a caffeinated grande cappuccino instead of a decaf that sent you into a writing frenzy. So I'm like, now that we've come to the end of this trilogy, I have to toast to the tour guide and the barista because
Oh,
they
Erin,
helped spur that on, right?
you're adorable. I'm going to toast you back, but with some antibacterial toast. You know what? I feel like this has been such an amazing interview. I feel like you really, it was such an intimate time to spend together. I don't think I've ever had anybody that knows the books this well.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
me, I think I love to research. I identify that in you as well. I
Thank
think
you so
you love
much.
to
Well,
research.
I was so looking forward to this. Like I said, I got to hear you last year and was just blown away. And then the Sunflower Sisters came up, and I was like, I cannot believe I'm going to get to talk to her about Sunflower Sisters. Like I've just been so excited about this. And I thought, what a way to end this year. This is our last book and author chat, for me at least, of 2020. And I couldn't have picked a better person to do it with.
Oh, I admire you so much. Thank you. I hope that we're seeing better things in 2021.
Yes.
Onward.
Yes. Hopefully can see you in person in 2021. Book tours will be back on, and
Uh,
author luncheons and
I cannot wait.
exhibitions and all of these things.
I'm getting excited just hearing you talk about it because that's the best part of what,
Yeah.
our jobs is to go
Yeah.
out and, talk to each other. And I kind of forgot that was a thing until you just mentioned it.
Well, and on top of it, but the silver lining with the pandemic is like with these virtual author chats, it's like you may get to reach readers and viewers in all kinds of cities and towns across the states that maybe doesn't have an independent bookstore, that aren't on stops for book tours, and like kind of
Yeah.
like how we talked about how Lilac Girls and Lost Roses have had a resurgence during the pandemic. It's like there could be whole new legions of readers starting the trilogy because of author chats they've seen on Facebook and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a whole nother,
Absolutely.
uh,
Yeah, who
flip.
knew that it was going to create this like reading resurgence?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
we have
people
to thank
always
you
read.
too. We have to thank you and the other authors too for, the little bits that you've given us during this pandemic. The arts have, if there's any doubt for some people, the arts have sustained us all, like you said about mental health and all of that. The arts have sustained us during this pandemic. And,
Yeah.
the work of everyone is so important, especially you. So we thank you. And we're honored to have you here at the Erudite
There's
Bibliophile.
only so much Netflix you can watch, right?
Yeah, at some point.
I love it, but after a while, you're like, I think I need something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for spending your evening with us. And we hope from here at the Erudite Bibliophile with Wanderlust, hope you have wonderful holidays. And we
You
can't wait
too.
till those projects that are coming out in the next year and 2 years. We can't wait till they're out.
Thanks so much, Erin.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Thank you.